At the ballet competition, Hee-do, a renowned fencer, encouraged her daughter to try her best. She told her daughter that winning or losing wasn't important. All that mattered was that she expressed her love for ballet. But her daughter didn't see it that way. She valued winning and losing, and wanted to become as great as her mother. This pressure caused her to completely crumble when she saw the previous contestant perform exceptionally well. She ran off stage, threw her costume in the trash, and decided to quit ballet altogether. Not wanting to listen to her mother's advice, she chose to leave home and spend the summer break at her grandmother's. The daughter went into the room where her mother had once lived. There, she found a diary and became curious about her mother's youth. She embraced the diary and read it in the courtyard of her grandmother's house. The story took her back to July 1998, when Hee-do was 18 years old. Her school's fencing club was forced to close due to the economic downturn. Coincidentally, Hee-do discovered that the nearby Taeyong school also had a fencing club, so she asked her mother to let her transfer. However, her mother refused, arguing that Hee-do should give up fencing and focus on her studies instead. The male lead, Yi-jin, was 22 at the time. His family had been very wealthy but went bankrupt overnight. He could only rely on part-time jobs to make ends meet. As usual, his newspaper delivery job was going smoothly. But one morning, when he delivered a newspaper to the female lead's family, the newspaper somehow broke a statue at Hee-do's house. The female lead witnessed it and yelled at him, accusing him of being cruel because he had rendered the little boy unable to function normally, even going so far as to say he couldn't even use the restroom. She said he had turned the little boy into a eunuch. After learning that the little boy was just a statue displayed at the front gate, he was stunned. When he tried to offer compensation, she yelled at him. Still fuming from her argument with her mother, she was simply taking it out on him. At that moment, he could only blame himself for being unlucky to have met the right person at the wrong time. After going to school, she didn't forget to wish him a safe journey. The next morning, as usual, she went to the bookstore to borrow novels and unexpectedly met Yi-jin working there. She reprimanded him for not saving the newly released volume for her, despite her prior instructions. While she was nagging, he noticed her runny nose on the page of the novel. She denied it and yelled at him. Then she brought up the previous incident, but he let it go and promised to save the latest volume for her. That night, she went to the Taeyong school's fencing club to scout it out. Suddenly, the school's coach appeared, catching her off guard. Seeing this, the female lead tried to persuade him to let her join the club because the club at her school was no longer functioning, and she genuinely loved the sport. However, she received a cold answer. "You're not very good, are you?" Like a bucket of cold water thrown in her face. She insisted on her understanding of the sport but couldn't convince him, and the coach underestimated her determination. Because she had blurted out that she would consider transferring schools, the female lead realized she had spoken too quickly without thinking. This was the seed of Hee-do's rebellion. Another reason she wanted to go to Taeyong school was because her fencing idol also attended that school. Hee-do didn't dare tell her mother about her desire to transfer, so she chose a more difficult path, trying to get expelled from her school. The next morning, with a sullen face, Hee-do intentionally bumped into the school's head girl to get her attention. Upon learning that Hee-do was a fencer, the girl exclaimed, "Why are you so careless? It will affect your body. How can you compete?" The female lead reminded Hee-do, "Be careful where you're going." At that moment, Hee-do realized things had gone too far. That day, in the bathroom, Hee-do accidentally overheard the same group of girls discussing how they were going to deal with another girl collectively that afternoon. Hee-do listened from inside and a crazy idea popped into her head. After school, she followed them to the spot and saw that the situation was quite serious. She immediately called the police, then grabbed an umbrella and jumped into the fray. Being a fencer, she quickly gained the upper hand. Everyone stopped fighting to watch her swordsmanship. As the sound of the police car approached, Hee-do instructed them to claim that she had instigated the whole thing. But life isn't a fairy tale. They scattered in all directions, leaving her alone. The police arrived and, thinking she was the victim, came to comfort her. At that moment, Hee-do realized how foolish and helpless she was and could only stand there awkwardly. That night, Hee-do appeared at a nightclub with her old scheme in mind. She dressed and made up in the style of her mother's urban older lady, swaggering in confidently. She was accidentally dragged to a karaoke room by a waiter. and to her surprise, Yijin was also there. Hee-do pretended not to know him, but when she was about to drink, Yijin stopped her. This annoyed his friend, who scorned Yijin with harsh words. Yijin said nothing, got up, and pulled Hee-do out by the hand. Seeing this, the guy threatened to call the police and have Hee-do arrested. At this point, Hee-do was like a fish in water, gleefully urging him to call quickly, leaving everyone bewildered. Yijin pressed the fire alarm button and left in a panic. As they went outside, he asked her why she was there. Yijin explained the harsh reality to her, which was more brutal than she imagined. However, when he remembered her argument with her mother that morning, he understood her heart. He didn't object but wanted her to pursue her passion intelligently. The next morning, Hee-do decided to persuade her mother to let her transfer schools. Her mother's response was anger. She even threatened to tear up her beloved novel. This made her angry. She poured out her heart and burst into tears. She ran outside, found her book, and glued it back together piece by piece. That night, she sneaked to the bookstore to return the book in secret. Unexpectedly, Yijin was still there and noticed it. The damaged book caused Hee-do to burst into tears like a child, and she ran straight home. The next day, she went to see the coach and begged him once again. This time, the coach unexpectedly threw his half-eaten apple into the air. In a reflex, her sword pierced the apple, and she passed the first round. Next was round 2, the red and black fate round. The coach asked her if she had any money. Hee-do thought her teacher wanted a bribe, but still gave her 3 cents to the coach. After a while, the coach told her to guess how many coins were in his hand, but of course, Hee-do guessed wrong. In round 2, she still lost. At this point, Hee-do decided to go all out with the coach, even taking off her shoes to bet. But she was still unlucky like the previous 2 times. Although she lost money and had no shoes left to wear, the coach reluctantly let her pass. Hee-do happily went home, unaware that her mother had asked the coach to do it. As she approached home, her mother told her to get in the car, but she refused. However, when she learned she was transferring schools, she wanted to get in the car, but her mother had already driven off. The next morning, when Yijin delivered the newspaper to her house, Hee-do ran out and told him the good news. Seeing him not responding, she thought he had left and didn't hear her, but he was still there, silently congratulating her. Upon arriving at her new school, the thing that made Hee-do most happy was training with Yu-rim. Min-ki mentioned the economic crisis and told her that her grandmother had donated all her gold except for her wedding ring. Hearing this, the little girl sent the pair of rings to her mother to look at. It was then that Hee-do realized she had been wrong to blame her mother. On her first day at the new school, Hee-do took a stroll around the campus and got to know people in her class. The class president was assigned to give her a tour, but in her heart, she just wanted to get to the training room. Hee-do was overjoyed to meet her idol and be able to continue her passion. But her joy was short-lived when everyone arrived at the training ground, and the person Hee-do was waiting for most hadn't arrived yet. When Yu-rim entered, in the female lead's eyes, she was like an angel out of a comic book. When Hee-do introduced herself, Yu-rim seemed annoyed. Before officially joining the club, the coach required Hee-do to beat Yu-rim within 3 days to be allowed to train there. After entering the changing room, the female lead gathered her courage to greet Yu-rim and express her admiration, even saying that she had transferred to this school because of her. The response was a cold look, a disrespectful tone, and harsh words. Yu-rim stated that training at this point was useless. Hee-do wasn't surprised but disappointed, and decided to observe Yu-rim from a distance. The next morning, she went to school. As if by some strange twist of fate, her favorite bathroom was locked, and the key was to solve an equation. Feeling stuck, suddenly a voice called out and told her the code. It was Yijin. Then, she rushed to the training ground because today was the match with Yu-rim, deciding whether she would be allowed to stay in the club. At first, Yu-rim quickly took the lead, but Hee-do quickly equalized the score. Suddenly, Yu-rim remembered that they had competed against each other as children, and Hee-do at that time was outstanding, quickly defeating Yu-rim. Back then, Hee-do was a nightmare for Yu-rim. Back to the present, the battle continued, but in the end, Hee-do won. They were only 1 point apart. Afterwards, the coach analyzed why Hee-do won, explaining that she understood Yu-rim too well, knowing her strategies and every move. Yu-rim, on the other hand, didn't understand Hee-do at all. As for our male lead, things weren't going smoothly. Because of his handsome looks and intelligence, the manager refused to hire him, fearing that he would steal customers from the hotel in the future. The next morning, Yu Rim went to school and met Jai Woon. He and the class president were best friends. Though a bad boy in school, Jai Woon was very popular with younger students. At this time, Hee-do went to the coach to get back what was lost, because she had won the previous match. She got her shoes back and her sixth sense, and she was also recognized by the teacher as having potential. This made Hee-do overjoyed. Later, the teacher handed her a document and asked her to take it to the broadcasting room. Coincidentally, the class president was the manager there and invited Hee-do for a tour. When she saw a recording with Yee-jin's name on it, the class president told her that he used to be very famous, academically brilliant, and from a super wealthy family, so he was very popular with girls. The two of them curiously turned on the recording, and Hee-do felt that his voice back then was full of life. In the evening, Hee-do went to the bookstore but couldn't find Yee-jin. The owner sent him home early and asked her to give this note to Yee-jin. When she arrived, she saw a sight she shouldn't have seen. Two men, victims of his family's bankruptcy, were there demanding their money back. Yee-jin could only cry helplessly and promised them he would never have the right to live happily, even for a moment, from now on. The two men left. Hee-do went inside, using the excuse of paying back the borrowed books to Yee-jin, but he was no longer in the mood to think about those few coins. So the two of them went to a convenience store for a drink, and he said he liked Hee-do's audacity. She took him to the back of the school, his old school, and said that he used to be very famous there. Suddenly, she walked over to the water fountain, turned the faucet backwards, and sprayed water wildly, looking very silly. But under the lights, the scene had a certain romantic touch. Hee-do laughed happily, but suddenly the security guard caught them, so they quickly left. At this moment, Hee-do allowed Yee-jin to be happy only with her, as a secret between the two of them. Yee-jin smiled secretly and accepted it. At that moment, Min-ki heard Hee-do's voice at the age of 18, but it turned out to be Hee-do in the present. Her mother came to pick up Min-ki for a bone adjustment to help with her ballet, although Min-ki didn't like it and even wanted to quit ballet. But she couldn't resist Hee-do. Back to the time when Hee-do was 18 years old. As usual, Yee-jin delivered newspapers to her house and included a note with a string of numbers, knowing she was terrible at math. He had solved the problem to get the code, helping her avoid an embarrassing situation in the bathroom. After arriving home, Hee-do ran into the class president going to school. The class president recognized the shirt Yee-jin was wearing as belonging to their club. She asked him to turn around, and when she learned that Yee-jin used to go to her school and was a senior, her attitude changed completely. She shyly introduced herself, especially when she learned that he was in the 2000 class but was currently living at her house. So, the class president immediately lifted all bans on Yee-jin. He took the opportunity to deliberately repeat his previous words to the junior, making her blush. The coach announced the national team roster from position 1 to 24. But surprisingly, Hee-do was ranked 26th. In class, when he found out that Yu Rim didn't bring her textbook and was sent out to kneel, Hee-do immediately stood up when the teacher asked who hadn't brought their book. Suddenly, the book flew over. It turned out that Jun wanted to approach Yu Rim, so he intentionally gave the textbook to the female lead. In class, the class president wrote a note asking her to have lunch with her. As it turned out, they went to Yu Rim's mother's restaurant, where Hee-do went every Saturday to see Yu Rim. After learning that the class president had once been arrogant with her senior Yee-jin, Hee-do also discovered that her friend was the daughter of the landlord and that they both lived in the same area. The female lead smiled and said not to worry because Yee-jin wasn't petty enough to hold a grudge. At this time, Yee-jin and his younger brother were eating at a restaurant. Suddenly, they ran into the guys who had bullied his younger brother. Seeing that things were not going well, Yee-jin stepped in to protect his brother, took their name tags, and warned them individually, causing them to quickly apologize and leave. His brother complained that he was too protective, because he was in his teens and wanted to be independent. In the training room, Hee-do discovered the reason why the senior didn't want his juniors to practice at night was because he was afraid they would become better than him. This reason made her feel ridiculous. Both of them were excited to know that House of Happiness episode 12 was out. Unexpectedly, both Hee-do and Yu Rim were crazy fans of the comic. When Yu Rim found out that the bookstore was out of the new volume, she remembered Yi Jin worked there and asked her mother to call him to save the comic for her. At the same time, Hee-do also arrived, but the comic was out of stock. When Yi Jin explained, Yu Rim suddenly appeared and asked about the comic. Hee-do angrily blamed Yi Jin for betraying his VIP customer to let someone else borrow it. Yu Rim then said she had placed an order, but Hee-do refuted it because the bookstore would prioritize people in the neighborhood first. In the end, following bookstore rules, Yi Jin decided to let Hee-do borrow the comic, making her feel proud in front of Yu Rim. As Hee-do was engrossed in reading, the coach called and asked about her ranking. The next morning, the announcement of the national team lineup included Hee-do because 2 people had dropped out due to family issues, making the female lead eligible to compete. Hearing the news, Hee-do was quite shocked because the Times had stolen her dream and now it was giving her a chance. On her way home, Hee-do saw a man looking for Yi Jin. Without thinking twice, she rushed to the bookstore and told him to run away while she would watch the counter. When the man came to ask for Yi Jin, she just said she was the only one working there. The man sighed and left. So she had saved Yi Jin's life once. After arriving home, Yi Jin suddenly saw a handwritten letter. He recognized the man from earlier as his father, not a debt collector. He rushed to the bus station to catch up with his father. After Hee-do saw the letter, she immediately ran out to find him because she didn't want him to miss his meeting with his father. At this time, Yi Jin also saw his father in the car. He used all his strength to chase after him, and finally, father and son met. He apologized for running away earlier. His father also guessed that many people had been bothering Yi Jin. Then he left. Yi Jin also took the bus home. Suddenly he saw Hee-do there. He hurriedly got off the bus. At this time, she was frantically searching to the point that her slippers broke. When Hee-do almost fell, a hand caught her. It was Yi Jin. He scolded her for not taking care of herself and preparing for the competition. She apologized for separating him from his father. When she found out he had met his father, she curiously asked him where he had gone to find him. He had gone to the bus station. At this point, she saw the difference between a press conference and her. Her slippers were broken. Hee-do couldn't walk home barefoot. Yi Jin thought for a moment, then sat in front of her with his broad shoulders. Any woman would want to climb on him. Hee-do was the same, but she didn't. When he stood up, holding the female lead's slipper, he almost made a fool of himself. In the end, his solution was to tie their feet together and jump home. It's true that intelligent people often have their own way. In the evening, she chatted with her online friend again. Hee-do told her everything that happened today. Early the next morning, Hee-do went to the coach and asked her to give her extra training. Finally, she had to grit her teeth and agree. When she asked what time to start, Hee-do immediately said 6:30 am. The coach immediately said, "Sleep is the most precious thing in my life." To get 30 more minutes of sleep, she had to rent a house near the school even though the price there was double. But she didn't hesitate and demanded that the female lead keep up with the lessons she set. Hee-do immediately agreed and did everything she asked. First, every morning, wear 5 kilograms of sand on your feet, 3 kilograms on your hands, 2 kilograms on your waist, and run to the coach's house to wake her up. Second, practice 1,000 thrusting movements a day, 300 in the morning, 400 at night. Third, every week, carry 2 water bottles and climb the mountain behind the school and get mineral water within 2 hours. Fourth, learn dance. She directs and dances for herself. This is arguably the most difficult thing because Hee-do has no musicality. When she practices, the coach also pays more attention to Hee-do, making other people quite envious. When Yu Rim met her in the bathroom, she asked if she was giving Hee-do private lessons. She replied, "Because the kid came begging, so I'm just giving her some extra coaching. Whoever it is, I'll help them," and didn't forget to remind Yu Rim that she wasn't as bold as Hee-do. In the evening, everyone went home. Only Hee-do and Yu Rim stayed to practice more. However, they didn't talk to each other. The coach, meanwhile, leisurely went into the internet cafe to play a game. Unexpectedly, all the computers were full. She was about to turn back when she saw her student and went to scold her for not training hard like the others. After she left, she raised the price of the training room and fined the 2 of them for staying late without permission. Yu Rim was silent and accepted, but Hee-do felt it was unreasonable and argued with the senior. So, she punished the 2 of them to stay and clean up the place. Not a single grain of sand was allowed to be left. Rim commented, "Hee-do is talkative, that's why she was punished." Hee-do blamed Rim for being timid, but what hurt Hee-do was that she had looked down on her training efforts and those of the mid-level fencers. Because for Hee-do, it doesn't matter what level, because everyone puts in the same effort, that needs to be respected. At this moment, Hee-do declared that she would be Rim's enemy, staying behind to be punished alone. She didn't go home but went to Yijin's place, hoping he would comfort her, and asked him to simply say Rim is wrong, but he couldn't. Today, it seemed like everyone was hurting her, and Hee-do angrily left in tears. Back home, Hee-do tore up and threw all the posters of Rim and the diaries she had once considered treasures into the trash. At this point, she decided to erase all the good memories of Rim. But luckily, her online friend said the words she had always wanted to hear. This made Hee-do much more cheerful on a day she had been quite hurt. She decided to anti-Rim and become her rival. At that moment, Yijin didn't stand with Hee-do, she left in tears. Thankfully, her online friend still understood and supported her. The other person promised to always be Hee-do's support system. The truth was, Rim was the one who listened to Hee-do's confessions every night. The next day, when she went to class, she suddenly discovered that Jae-woong was dancing very lightly. So Hee-do begged him to teach her. Though Jae-woong didn't like it at first, he finally gave in and took Hee-do to his and the class president's secret base. It was like a different world, they would operate there. They were also very curious about how a fencer would need to know how to dance. But in reality, Hee-do didn't know either. But with this opportunity, Jae-woong wanted her to put the lotion in the cabinet every day. He only taught Rim that. At first, Hee-do was annoyed and refused, but because she wanted to complete the task, she made a deal with him. At this time, Yijin went to her house to visit his brother and learned that his sports car had been transferred to her by his father, and it was still his. This made him very happy, but his joy was short-lived. He received sad news. He had failed the interview again despite trying his best, and luck still wasn't on his side. At this moment, Hee-do was called into the coach's office to talk. She had known about Hee-do's argument with the senior, but the coach hadn't called Hee-do there to scold her, but to teach the female lead how to solve problems wisely, not impulsively. She supported Hee-do for daring to face the problem, instead of letting it grow bigger. At this time, she gave Hee-do the problem, but the solution was up to her to figure out, use her head to solve it. Hee-do came home and saw Yijin sitting drunk in front of the house, so she went over to talk to him. She successfully made him laugh, and her ability to turn tragedy into comedy resonated deeply with Yijin. But because he was so tired and drunk, Yijin fell asleep without realizing it. Hee-do thought he was pretending, but no matter how much she called him, he didn't wake up. Worried that he was cold, she wrapped a super warm blanket around him, and also added a sign that said, "Failed the interview today. Please do not disturb." The next morning, Hee-do went to school as usual, but added the task of putting milk in Brazil's cabinet. It was her first time, so she was a bit nervous. She looked around before she acted. Accidentally, she saw the umbrella she had given him. She thought to herself, "I don't like him, so why am I taking such good care of his umbrella?" But at this moment, Yijin didn't know how to face his friendly neighbors. Because everyone, everywhere he went, greeted him enthusiastically. "You failed the interview yesterday? I'm so sorry." There was more laughter than pity. Yijin was really hurt at this point. When he got home, he met the class president. She kindly gave him the milk, but when she knew that her senior was very bitter about Hee-do, she turned 180 degrees and said that they weren't friends anymore and left gracefully. At this time, the senior in the training room was complaining about Hee-do and Rim secretly training at night. Suddenly the door swung open. Hee-do, like a powerful woman, walked in, clenched her two hands, walked straight to her senior. It seemed like she was about to fight. But unexpectedly, Hee-do knelt down and slammed her head to the ground to apologize and promised that she would not train alone next time. She would stay and train with all the brothers and sisters in the training room. Hearing this, everyone laughed because of Hee-do's setup. The coach standing nearby couldn't help but praise her little student's intelligence. The senior at this time was forced to stay and immediately told her, "If you want, just train alone." Hee-do took the opportunity and hugged the senior's legs, begging to stay and practice together. Looking at the scene, which was both funny and sad, It was because Hee-do was too enthusiastic. On her way home from school, Hee-do suddenly ran into the bullies from before, since she had a new umbrella to fight them off last time. But now she was empty-handed. Running was the best option. But Hee-do suddenly realized her legs were much lighter. She ran very fast. Seeing that they couldn't catch up, they got on a motorcycle and chased her. Luckily, she ran into Yi-jin. He had just gotten his car back. But the male lead didn't let her get in because she had humiliated him and wanted her to apologize before he would help. Hee-do didn't have time to apologize, so she got in the car even without being invited. So, 2 wheels couldn't compete with 4 wheels. And as if by some strange twist of fate, the sky, which had been beautiful, suddenly turned stormy, and Yi-jin's car hadn't been used in a long time, so the roof couldn't be closed. Hee-do was very happy at this moment because she hadn't felt this way in a long time. When they got home, they were both wet. Yu-rim and her friend weren't in much better shape either. Yu-rim came to bring him dinner. Jae-woong came to return the lunchbox to the class president, and coincidentally they were on the same bus, so they ended up arriving together. Yu-rim wasn't happy to see the male lead and female lead together. Luckily, the class president came back, breaking the awkward atmosphere. Suddenly, her mother's scream echoed. Everyone rushed inside without thinking, and it turned out that her mother's crab cake had fallen. The 5 of them rushed to help. Afterwards, the class president's mother treated them to a delicious fish soup, but no one liked the taste except Hee-do. At this time, the mother found a camera, and she took pictures of the kids eating. Minishi was also looking at the picture, asking who the man her mother liked at the time was. Her grandmother looked at the picture and couldn't help but say, "Time goes by so fast." Then, she brought the picture to Hee-do. At this point, Hee-do looked at the picture, smiled sadly and missed her youth. Hee-do was calmly putting the drink in the cabinet. Yu-rim didn't expect her friend to be behind her and see everything. She knew this drink was brought in by Hee-do. She had promised that she wouldn't drink it anymore. At this point, the female lead and her friend finally finished learning the dance, and she also realized the coach's intention. She wanted Hee-do to feel the rhythm and make her legs more flexible. But the female lead didn't forget to tell her to apologize to Yu-rim because she misunderstood that Hee-do was the one who put the milk in. Because the international competition was coming up, Yu-rim had to move to the centralized dormitory to train. That meant she wouldn't be at school anymore. Knowing this, Jae-woong went to her house very early to say goodbye and explained that he had asked Hee-do to put the milk in the cabinet. At this time, the 2 of them had also tacitly determined the importance of each other in their hearts. Hee-do was very happy to have learned the dance and wanted to show the coach, but she said there was no need. Hee-do was very shocked because she had practiced for so long. At this point, the teacher said that what she wanted to convey was the meaning behind it. Even though Hee-do understood that it was not enough to qualify for the national team, so she reminded her not to be complacent. Afterwards, Hee-do and the coach fought hand to hand, and of course, the female lead lost. Because in her heart, she had already lost to the person facing her, and this was also a lesson for Hee-do to be confident from within. Then she wouldn't be afraid of anyone. Yi-jin arrived at the training room and visited Hee-do. As he entered, he exclaimed that she looked cool in that outfit. Then, Hee-do took the initiative to go to the storage room and find another outfit for him. When he put it on, Yi-jin looked quite handsome and it suited him. She proposed that they fence each other for 3 minutes. If he scored, she would do anything he wanted. It was true that he couldn't beat her, but as time was about to run out, he tricked her. The comic book Hee-do loved had a new volume out. This made Hee-do lose focus, so Yi-jin scored a point and won. After knowing she was tricked by him, Hee-do was quite angry, but when she saw his handsome face and smile as sweet as honey, she no longer wanted to blame him, and her heart started to race. He also advised her not to lose faith in herself. The past failures were stepping stones for us to move forward, and he believed in her. This boosted Hee-do's strength because even her mother didn't trust her. Her mother had scolded her because she saw Hee-do and Yi-jin being affectionate in front of the house. She showed contempt for her daughter's fencing passion because she wasn't dedicated to it. She even gave her sword to that boy. Hee-do was very disappointed because her own mother didn't trust her. At this time, Min-kai thought back to how she had been envious of her mother because she had once been so radiant that she was overshadowed. But now she finally knew what her mother had gone through and felt admiration for her. Hee-do now went to the competition with a determination to fear no one and was extremely confident. Yi-jin stayed home and suddenly received a call from his younger brother. The boy sounded very proud of his brother. The reason he was so happy was because the 3 friends who used to bully him this time had bowed their heads and apologized in fear. At this time, the first round of qualifying had begun and Hee-do was on the stage. But in her mind, she always respected her opponent and their efforts. Hee-do quickly took the lead in the first match. Meanwhile, Yi-jin's younger brother was beaten and humiliated by 2 strangers. When Yi-jin heard the news, he rushed to the school towards Hee-do. At this time, she was constantly leading in the matches under everyone's astonished gazes. The final match had begun. The coach reminded her to be careful of this person because she was very good at using tricks to make her opponents lose their composure and take advantage of the opportunity to knock them down. Hee-do didn't pay much attention. When the match began, Hee-do lost 5 points in a row. At this time, the coach also commented, "This girl is just testing her opponent." As expected, Hee-do then scored points consecutively. But when she was about to win, she played dirty, first testing her sword, then demanding that Hee-do tie her hair up. Hee-do didn't think much of it at first. Then she wanted to check her shoes. At this point, Hee-do was truly shaken and lost her composure. She kept demanding the match be paused to tie her shoelace. Hee-do protested to the referee, but it was futile. So, the female lead asked to go inside for a drink. The coach scolded Hee-do because she knew her opponent was deliberately provoking her but still got caught up in it. Finally, Hee-do regained her composure. Contrary to expectations, Hee-do won and became a national team player. At this time, her mother at the editorial office also received news that her daughter had won. She felt very proud of her child. But when she looked at her daughter's profile picture, she couldn't help but want to pat her head. The picture didn't look decent at all. The class president and Jae-woong were also shocked that Hee-do had won. But the class president's mother still didn't recognize this girl, after knowing she had been to her house, and in addition, international player Yu-rim had also arrived. She was extremely shocked and felt very honored. At this time, the 2 students went out to celebrate. Hee-do's company saw a phone call and rushed to call Yi-jin to tell him the news, but nobody answered. The next morning, she rushed to the bookstore to find Yi-jin, but received information that he had quit because of a sudden emergency. She felt something was wrong, so after school, she went to his house to find him. At this time, the class president and Jae-woong went back after knowing Yi-jin had quit his job. So, the 3 of them went inside to check the situation. Unexpectedly, he had moved out. That night, Yu-rim also ran over. When Jae-woong went to open the gate, she ignored him and left. After knowing that he had moved out that morning, the 2 of them went home with disappointed faces. Hee-do asked for Yi-jin's phone number. After giving it to Yu-rim, she told her to inform her if she could get in touch with him. When she got home, she saw the sword hanging on the door. At this point, she knew Yi-jin was really gone, but she believed that one day he would come back to find her. At this time, Yi-jin and his younger brother were on their way out of the city. They had arrived at the island where their mother lived. The truth was that their father had used his younger brother's name to set up the company, so the trouble came to the boy. After arriving at the island, the 2 brothers cut off all contact and communication. Seeing her son arrive, their mother cried with longing, but she always asked about his father, then complained that she missed his father. The 2 kids were helpless. They didn't know if they were actually her blood relatives anymore. During meals, she kept asking her eldest son to describe his father when he had met him, but he had already described him over a dozen times through phone calls. Then, she also sarcastically said that the little boy didn't know what love was, so he couldn't understand her longing. At this time, a woman, who was industrious, hurt 3 men in one instant. The younger brother, when he had to study here, objected because the place was so rural, but in the end, he accepted the fact. At this time, Hee-do went to the class president to borrow his CDs because she wanted to listen to his voice every day. It was like self-encouragement. Then, her mother took Hee-do to take pictures because she didn't have any pictures that looked like her to be put on TV. Suddenly, the photographer asked them to take a picture together as a souvenir. Both mother and daughter refused at the same time, making him think that the stepmother and stepson were not close. After moving into the national team's dormitory, Hee-do unexpectedly ended up sharing a room with Yu-rim. The coach reminded her not to bother Yu-rim because her health was very important. After moving into the room, Yu-rim immediately talked about all the rules and regulations for living there. Then, Yu-rim told her to not snore at night because her ears were very sensitive. But the truth was that Yu-rim was like a loud machine. Hee-do couldn't fall asleep. She took out Ijin's CD and listened to it, but accidentally dropped it on the floor. The female lead thought she would be scolded, but unexpectedly Yu-rim was sleeping like the dead. Hee-do could only sneer and then went back to the bed that Ijin had arranged. At this time, Ijin was constantly working on the island. He quickly adapted to the life of the islanders. They were quite fond of him. Ijin missed her, so he took out his phone to listen to the messages she left, listening over and over again until he ran out of battery. At this time, Yu-rim returned to school. She saw the welcome banner for Hee-do and felt a pang in her heart. But what she didn't expect was that Jae-woong ignored her. Seeing this, she asked why, and only then did she know that the last time she had ignored her friend because she was busy looking for Yijin. After realizing her mistake, she took the initiative to apologize and everything was resolved. Hee-do was making visible progress day by day, but one day she suddenly got sick. The coach bluntly demanded that she change rooms so as not to infect Yu-rim. She felt a little heartbroken at this time, feeling hurt because her brother hadn't accepted the fact that their family was poor. He always pretended to have everything in front of his friends. Not only was Yijin his brother because he looked very poor, the brother in his mind was the Yijin who drove a sports car, not selling fish like now. Later, the two brothers argued about it. Yijin went outside and felt uncomfortable, so he took out a cigarette and smoked. Unexpectedly, the person he saw, he knew the boy was very stressed coming here. Then, the two of them went to drink and talk. After he went home, he couldn't contain himself and took out his phone to listen to Hee-do's voice. While working, he accidentally watched her fencing program and learned that she won 3rd place. He was very happy even though they were far apart, but they had similar memories and thought about each other. At this time, he truly felt comfortable. Thinking about Hee-do made all his worries and fatigue disappear. Hee-do also received a message from him, and he promised to come back before episode 15 of the comic House of Happiness. The younger brother also realized his mistake. But instead of apologizing directly to his brother, he sent his story to the radio station and wanted to ask for advice. At this time, Yijin took his mother to an internet cafe. At first, she was very confused because she didn't know what they were doing there. But when she saw her husband on the other side of the screen, she immediately burst into tears as if they had never been separated. Yijin, at this moment, had to bow his head and type out his mother's words so his father could know her boundless longing. After that, the two of them walked along the beach. Yijin asked his mother to return to Seoul to work and try to get back what he had lost. Luckily, his mother supported him when he got on the train and read his younger brother's letter. This made him extremely happy. Arriving in Seoul, he became an intern reporter at the UPS news agency. He was also the first to be accepted, even with only a high school diploma. At this time, the deadline was approaching, but he couldn't find any public phone booth to call. The radio station kept urging him. In a bind, he went to a pet grooming salon. When they learned he had chosen such a ridiculous place, the news agency scolded him because Toa Court is the word for dogs there. But there was no other way. Luckily, at that crucial moment, the dogs knew to keep quiet. However, when he was about to finish, they barked and growled. This made Yijin and the owner scared. Sweat poured down like rain. In the end, everything was resolved. On his way back, he saw a notice on the bookstore. House of Happiness episode 15 is out. At this time, he remembered his promise to Hee-do after the competition ended. Hee-do and Yu-rim both returned to school to take the midterms, and the female lead didn't forget to return the audio tapes to the class president. She also learned that the four of them were still in the same class. Before taking the test, Jae-woong was worried about Yu-rim, so he showed her how to guess the answers. He himself used his skills to take the test. In the end, he got 9 points, while Yu-rim got 30 points. After finishing the exam, Yu-rim and Hee-do had to go to the training room. The coach scolded Yu-rim in front of Hee-do because she kept losing to Hee-do. Then, he constantly lectured and reminded Yu-rim that if she lost to Hee-do, she would lose everything. Accidentally, Hee-do heard these words. After returning to the room, Yu-rim, feeling uncomfortable, slammed the door shut, causing Hee-do to speak up. Then, Hee-do reminded her friend to start practicing tomorrow, go home at night, and be careful not to make noise. Realizing that Hee-do had heard everything, Yu-rim started talking rudely again. Hee-do also revealed the truth about the umbrella. At this time, her friend was quite shocked, but Yu-rim wanted her to just be a fan and not interfere in her life, to avoid messing things up. Hee-do went crazy at this point, so each of them grabbed the other's head with one hand. Luckily, the teacher came to stop the two of them. As for Yi-jin, at this time he was given a very important task, which was to draw lots for the broadcast content among the stations. Luckily for him, he chose the topic that the public was least interested in, which was fencing. And he was again tormented by the head of the news agency for being useless. Seeing this, Yi-jin promised to make this news bulletin hot. At the same time, Hee-do's mother came to invite the coach to be a commentator, but she refused and brought up the past 8 years. Hee-do's mother had blamed her for taking bribes from parents. It was a scar in the coach's life. When Hee-do's mother told her to forget it because it was so long ago, but the coach was too hurt and told her not to forget it. It was a scar in her life. The next morning, Yi-jin was collecting news at a protest, and he accidentally ran into Hee-do again. After knowing that he had become a reporter now, she was very happy. Yi-jin also felt warm inside because Hee-do had kept her promise to wait for him before episode 15 came out, and now the female lead could read it. Then, she invited him to have dinner. When they got there, she found out she was eating with her new boyfriend who she had only met for 3 days. They were being cheesy together, making Yi-jin laugh uncontrollably. But after knowing that Hee-do was dating him because she wanted to experience love, he was speechless. Regardless, he felt a little empty inside. The next day, Yi-jin was assigned to cover Hee-do's competition. At this moment, Hee-do was participating in the decisive match to compete in the finals with Yu-rim. As expected, she won with a score of 15-8. Yi-jin was happy for her. When the match ended, Hee-do saw her coach talking privately with Yu-rim. After that, she went to ask the coach who he would choose to support if she reached the finals. He didn't answer, but Hee-do knew it was Yu-rim. The next day, the finals arrived. The fencers all arrived a few hours early to warm up. When the female lead opened her sword case, she discovered that someone had taken hers by mistake. She guessed that the player had taken it by mistake yesterday. The female lead asked the receptionist to contact her opponent and learned that they had boarded a train 20 minutes ago to tour Seoul. As a replacement, Hee-do asked the receptionist to ask them to wait for her at the next train station. The coach tried to stop her because the match was only 3 hours away. Hee-do was determined to go because she wanted to fight with the sword that had accompanied her. After switching sword cases, Hee-do was on her way back. Suddenly, the train malfunctioned and had to be delayed for 30 minutes. At this time, she was very panicked because the match was only an hour away and her phone was also out of battery. When Yi-jin talked to his senior, he learned that Hee-do's train was delayed. So, he immediately ran to the train station to pick her up. Luckily, he met the female lead and quickly drove her back using a shortcut. In the car, when she asked him who he would support, he replied that it was Yu-rim, because she already had a golden nugget to support her. But Hee-do said the two of them had broken up after 7 days of dating. He was quite surprised. Then, he asked to wait for her to take the shortcut to get there in time for the match. Suddenly, 2 police cars arrived to escort them. This made her quite happy and feel her importance. Finally, the female lead arrived at the competition in time. The 2 players, Yu-rim and Hee-do, were ready. After going onto the stage, Hee-do was quite confident in herself. At this time, she remembered her deceased father. He used to say that progress isn't a straight line up, but rather a series of steps. So many people give up halfway because they feel useless. And he was also the one who brought fencing into Hee-do's life. Previously, she had been criticized by her coach for lacking talent and advised to give up. Sometimes, Hee-do also doubted herself, but her father's words made her go in the right direction. The results were revealed at this moment. She was already a national player and promised to bring back a gold medal for her father. So, this time, Hee-do was very determined. When the match began, Yu-rim easily took the lead with 3 points, but Hee-do quickly closed the gap. The female lead also saw Yu-rim's weakness. She jumped up and successfully struck her opponent's shoulder, scoring a point. The scores quickly evened out. At this moment, all it took was one more point for either of them to win the gold medal. Both chose to attack. In less than a second, the signal light went off. It was so fast that the audience couldn't see who was faster. The referee raised his hand toward the mainland. Hidu, this year, she was the champion. Yu Rim protested the result because she felt she was faster, but to no avail. She cried right there on the court. Although she won, Hidu didn't feel happy seeing this. When asked who the first person Hidu thought of when she received the gold medal, the answer was her father, because she had kept her promise to him. After the press conference began, the news outlets asked Hidu if the result was correct. Hidu confirmed that it was absolutely correct, but Yu Rim, sitting right there, refuted her, saying clearly that she was faster. They even thought Hidu had bribed the referee. In their minds, the gold medal was Yu Rim's, and she was holding it because she had stolen it. Hidu asked all the journalists in return, should she have lost this match to fit their assumption? Then, Hidu left the gold medal behind and walked out of the press conference. Seeing this, Yu Rim ran after her. The two of them argued backstage. Hidu felt that the gold medal she was holding had lost its value, while Yu Rim always saw herself as the victim and kept saying that she was faster. Hidu just smirked and took her bag to leave. She didn't go back with the team but wandered to a place she didn't even know. Because of pressure and obsession, Hidu went to the pharmacy to buy sedatives. At this time, her mother's news bulletin appeared. She said that Hidu's medal, was it deserved? The female lead received another blow from her mother, then ran out of the pharmacy. Late at night, Hidu discovered that she had left her phone at the pharmacy. When she used a public phone to call her phone, Yijin was on the other end. He kept asking her where she was. Actually, Hidu didn't know either. After asking the people there and telling Yijin the address, he immediately ran over. He kept nagging her for her actions that morning and advising Hidu to go home, but she refused to go. Finally, he had to bring up her promise to him before he could convince her to go home. The next day, Hidu and Yu Rim were disciplined and temporarily expelled from the Judgment Day training center. On their way home, Yu Rim was picked up by her father, while Hidu felt heartbroken and went home alone. She bought a train ticket back. After arriving home, Hidu chose not to go inside, but instead went to a late-night restaurant. At this time, Yijin had made efforts to find his way to the airport and persuade the referee to correct the match results. Because he had helped the owner of the delicious meat restaurant, he agreed. But Hidu didn't know about it at this time, when her mother was showing the news on TV. The female lead got up and left, but when she heard the news that Yijin had brought, she realized he had helped clear her name. Then, Hidu returned to the table. Suddenly tears fell unconsciously. The gentleman at the table next to her saw this and asked if she was upset. Then, he recognized her as Hidu. He comforted her because lately she had been severely criticized by online communities. This should have been the happiest time for Hidu, but instead, she burst into tears because only now did someone comfort her. After that, she went to the storage room at the school, the secret base of the class president. While she was singing, suddenly footsteps approached. She was startled, turned off the light and the radio. It turned out that the security guard was checking the door. So, Hidu was locked inside. She had to call Yijin to find the class president to open the door, because at this moment, she really needed to use the bathroom. But while waiting, Hidu discovered a shocking secret. On the chair, it was engraved with the words, "Ra" or "Love Yijin." And the radio at this time was playing a recording of the two of them being affectionate. Hidu was stunned. When the three of them opened the door and saw this, they knew something was fishy. After hearing the lovey-dovey words of the two people, Hidu felt quite uncomfortable. She found an excuse to go to the bathroom to avoid Yijin, but somehow she ended up in the men's bathroom, and Yijin scared the daylights out of her. At this time, the class president and Jai Woon were in the hallway. Suddenly, he started telling ghost stories. But when they looked at the clock, they saw it was already 12 o'clock midnight. They could only run for their lives. Yijin saw this and quickly grabbed Hidu's hand and ran after them, even though he didn't know what was happening. The next morning, Hidu went to the library to look back at the album of Yijin's class. She wanted to know who the girl Yijin said he loved was, but the pictures of the two of them were all cut out. There was no other way. She had to take out the group photo and cross out each person one by one. In the end, there was one girl left, but her face was covered by her hair. Everything was like a waste of time. At this time, Jai Woong and the class president found out that Yijin was going to move back to their house. The two of them unanimously opposed it, but because their mother liked Yijin's way of life so much, their opposition was ineffective. The two of them went to the grocery store to sit together to get rid of their resentment. The class president even wanted to move to Jai Woong's house to avoid the sight of his senior, but he was rejected. Hee-do came out and also found out that Yijin was about to move back to the class president's house. So she volunteered to help him and didn't forget to drag the two reluctant people next to him. The next day, Yijin came to their house, and they had a small party to welcome him back. Suddenly Yu-rim came from somewhere. Hee-do walked out with a gloomy face and asked one of the two to leave, but neither of them would give in, so the two of them stayed to help Yijin. While cleaning, Hee-do accidentally saw a picture of Yijin and another girl looking very affectionate. She thought this was the girl she was looking for, but Yu-rim clarified that this was someone else, Yijin's longest love. The other one was just a fling. This was something Hee-do kept in her heart. After going outside to get something and coming back into the house, she suddenly saw Yijin talking to some older men. She didn't forget that he was very charming, and charming with people of all ages. She didn't forget to stick the affectionate picture of the two of them on Yijin's luggage. At this point, Yijin didn't know where it came from either. It seemed like he didn't remember anything about it anymore. After entering the house, Hee-do saw Jai Woong weekly practicing arm exercises. She made fun of him and demonstrated the correct way to do it. When she herself practiced too hard, Yijin suddenly walked in, making Hee-do blush. At this moment, her hand lost control and the equipment fell out and broke the window pane. Yijin was stunned, but after seeing Hee-do in the broken glass, he quickly picked her up and carried her out. Jai Woong saw this and wanted to be carried out as well, but he was refused. At this time, the kids had taken a rather sexy newspaper and pasted it over the broken glass. Seeing the picture made them blush. Luckily Hee-do was quick-witted and drew a more conservative outfit for the girl in the picture. The coach, at this time, also secretly gave the gold medal to Hee-do's mother and wanted the two to reconcile. In the evening, the mother and daughter clashed again. Hee-do blamed her mother for not caring about her feelings and calmly saying on TV that Hee-do's gold medal was undeserved. But Hee-do didn't know how her mother felt at that time. That was when she felt helpless and wished she hadn't taken this job. The next day, Yijin went to work, suddenly received an urgent call about a fire at the government building and was assigned to get the news. He quickly got valuable information to report, but unexpectedly while reporting, his computer crashed and all data was lost. Although he knew this was live news, when he saw this, Yijin was stunned and disconnected from the newsroom. Feeling powerless, he shouted loudly into his blanket. After returning to the station, he was reprimanded by his senior, but he could only apologize for his irresponsible work. Hee-do knew he would be sad about the news that night, so she bought a gift and left it in front of his door to comfort him. This made Yijin feel even more embarrassed. The next day, while Yu-rim was eating, a neighbor suddenly ran in to report that the swindler had run away, and their money was gone overnight. Yu-rim didn't know what was going on, but that night she happened to see her mother crying helplessly in her room. Yu-rim also blamed herself for not being able to help her mother. The next morning, the council decided to punish Yu-rim and Hee-do by expelling them from the training center for 3 months. Hee-do returned to pack her things. Yu-rim suddenly came back, but she left in the middle of packing, leaving Hee-do quite curious but unable to ask. While Hee-do was walking down the hallway, she suddenly heard singing coming from the pool. She immediately went to check, and looking around she didn't see anyone. Suddenly she looked up and saw Yu-rim sitting on the ledge. Then, her friend stood up and let herself fall freely into the pool. Hee-do was very worried when she didn't see Yu-rim surface, but then Yu-rim came up out of the water and cried very loudly. Hee-do realized this wasn't the first time Yu-rim had done this. Hee-do left there as if she had lost her soul. That night, she chatted with her online friend, and they finally decided to meet at the park, each holding a yellow rose to easily identify each other. The next day, the coach called them both in and announced that they were only suspended for 3 months, meaning the council still wanted them to participate in the next competition. After giving instructions, the coach wanted to talk to Hee-do privately and advised her to stop being close to Yi-jin, otherwise she would regret it later. That night, Hee-do met Yi-jin on the bus, but she didn't proactively say hello and just stared at him. Then, the two of them got off the bus at the same time. On the way back, Hee-do accidentally got ice cream on her face. Yi-jin wiped it off for her and intentionally left a streak of ice cream on her face. Seeing Yi-jin just looking at her and smiling, Hee-do was puzzled. Yi-jin joked that he was happy to see Hee-do. At this point, Hee-do was secretly happy because she thought he had feelings for her. After entering the house, she discovered the ice cream stain on her face and understood everything. The female lead rushed out, blaming him for playing with other people's feelings. This made her very uncomfortable, and she told him to stop treating her like a child. Yi-jin didn't have time to say anything before Hee-do ran back into the house. The next day, Yu-rim went to Yi-jin's house to borrow a camera because today was the day she and her friend were meeting, and she wanted to take some commemorative photos. After knowing that Yu-rim didn't know anything about her counterpart, Yi-jin offered to go along. At this time, Yu-rim felt very nervous. Suddenly, she saw Hee-do holding a yellow rose. Yu-rim understood everything, and because she was so flustered, she gave the rose to Yi-jin to hold. This also made Hee-do misunderstand. The female lead thought this was Yi-jin's destiny. So she went up to him and declared that Yi-jin would be hers in the future. After knowing that Hee-do was the friend she had been talking to every night, Yu-rim didn't know how to face her, so she ran away, leaving Yi-jin to deal with everything. As for Hee-do, after finding out she had mistaken the person, she felt very embarrassed about her confession. That night, Yu-rim tossed and turned, unable to sleep because she felt guilty towards Hee-do. When she remembered their late-night conversations, she realized how much she had hurt Hee-do. As for Hee-do, she tossed and turned because of her silly confession that morning, feeling like she had no face to meet Yi-jin. Suddenly, her mother passed the gold medal through the window and apologized to Hee-do. She had no other choice. At this point, the mother had gathered all her courage to say those words. Hee-do was stunned by her mother's actions. She took back the gold medal and felt very happy, somewhat comforted. The next day, Yu-rim went to find Yi-jin, begging him to keep this secret. Suddenly, Yi-jin saw Hee-do walking over, and unconsciously Yu-rim hid to the side. As for Hee-do, when she saw Yi-jin, she also chose a different route to go to the training room. At this point, Hee-do needed lubricating oil to wipe the sword, and she accidentally asked Yu-rim for help. Unexpectedly, she quickly handed it to Hee-do, but looked very awkward. Hee-do felt quite surprised because before, no matter how many times she asked, her friend pretended not to see. The female lead asked her friend if she had done anything wrong to her, but suddenly another friend came in to invite her out to eat, so Yu-rim went out with her friend, finding an excuse to avoid Hee-do. As for Hee-do, at this time, she happened to see Yu-rim's Happy Home Volume 16. The female lead threw all sense of shame aside and took it out to read. Suddenly Yu-rim came back, saw the scene, but this time she didn't show any displeasure. She just silently stood behind and watched. Hee-do was startled to see Yu-rim behind her, and quickly blamed the wind for opening the door and making her see it. Then, she covered up by criticizing Yu-rim for not following the rules and bringing comics to school, then ran out. That afternoon, the coach took them to Yu-rim's family restaurant to show support. When Yu-rim's mother saw Hee-do and realized she had beaten her daughter, she suddenly gave her a hug. Hee-do felt quite awkward, but she comforted her because she had been subjected to public criticism in recent days. Then, she decided to treat Hee-do to a nice meal. The next day, when Hee-do went to the training room to film a documentary, she blamed Yi-jin for filming without warning, but actually, she gave him no chance to speak. She wouldn't answer his calls, and even avoided him all day. No matter how awkward it was, the documentary had to be filmed. At this time, there were two girls hiding in the bathroom smoking and constantly gossiping about Yu-rim. Unfortunately, Yu-rim was outside and heard everything, but she didn't do anything. Suddenly, the door to the bathroom next door was kicked open. It turned out to be Hee-do. After locking the door, she dragged the two students out and beat them fiercely, because she wouldn't allow anyone to speak ill of Yu-rim. One of the two girls saw that she couldn't fight back, so she grabbed a broom and tried to hit Hee-do from behind, but Yu-rim saw this and immediately jumped in to block her. Hee-do knew that Yu-rim had also heard the whole story and was sad, so she used all her strength to push the two female students out. Rim ran after her and burst into tears because Hee-do always treated her well. Then, Rim revealed her true identity, which surprised Hee-do. After confiding in each other, they immediately embraced and cried. Their relationship became good from that day forward. That afternoon, Yijin continued filming the documentary, but he couldn't believe his eyes at the overly intimate behavior of the two girls. He even had to stop filming and ask them to stop acting, because they looked no different from a first date. But the truth was, they weren't acting at all. The next day, the two of them were invited to the studio and asked to refilm the controversial touch scene from recently. Even though they didn't want to, they couldn't do anything else. For fear of injuring each other, they didn't dare use force. After filming for no less than 10 times, the reporter saw this and stood up and yelled because he thought they weren't trying hard enough. If they had done it well, they would have been finished a long time ago. So, the two of them decided to do it well. This time, Hee-do suddenly twisted her ankle. Rim was extremely worried about Hee-do, even though Hee-do comforted her that she was fine. When Yijin found out, he ran over and got into a conflict with his senior because he thought they only cared about their own interests and didn't care about the athlete's health. After that, he took her to the hospital. On the way, the two of them saw a rainbow. Hee-do wanted to stop and watch it, so they stood together and admired the rainbow. At this time, Hee-do wanted to know what Yijin thought of her, and Yijin wasn't shy at all and confessed that he loved her. Because of filming too many times and causing Hee-do to get hurt, Yijin had a conflict with his senior. The next day, Yijin went to work on his own initiative to apologize for his rash behavior. But he was met with scorn. The senior even mocked Yijin by saying that he had only finished high school and his family had fallen into poverty, so there was nothing to respect. After that, Yijin punched him. That night, everyone went out for a party together and talked about the fact that the station was considering staff assignments based on qualifications. It was possible that Yijin would be dropped because he was helpless, so he got drunk. At this time, Rim was feeling quite down because her parents kept buying her things, even though their family was struggling financially. She called Jae-woong to talk. On the way, they suddenly met the class president carrying bulky luggage. It turned out that she was going to the secret base, so the three of them decided to sneak into the school. While walking, the door suddenly opened, making all three of them scream. Then, they discovered that 3 classmates were stealing cushions. In the end, they caught the 3 thieves. Luckily, Rim was there, so they scared them off. But because of this, Jae-woong got beaten up by the teacher. The class president found out and went to apologize. She said it was her fault for bringing him along. She spoke out about the teacher's injustice and violence on the radio, and Yijin's little brother didn't miss a single word. The next day, Yijin asked the coach for permission for Rim and Hee-do to go to the beach to film extracurricular activities for the station. The class president and Jae-woong also wanted to go along. As long as the class president could go, Jae-woong would also be allowed to go. But who would ask for permission for the class president? In the end, Yijin was chosen, but at first, he didn't agree. So, the class president used her trick. Every night, she left a 5-course meal in Yijin's room, but one day she decided to stop cooking. That's when the fish took the bait. Yijin came home and didn't see the food. He quickly went to find the class president. At this point, her mother also came home, and she didn't know if there were thieves in the house or not, because food had been missing lately. To silence the girl, Yijin asked his mother to let the class president participate in the extracurricular activity. The next morning, the class president told everyone the good news. So, they went on a fun trip together. The next day, Yijin picked up the kids. When he saw how messy they looked, he closed his eyes, stepped on the gas and drove off. After getting in the car, he didn't let Hee-do sit in the passenger seat because her brain hadn't evolved enough so she wouldn't be able to watch the road. The boy in the back didn't let her in either because he wanted Rim to sit next to him. It was quite an unstable trip. After arriving, Yijin took them to the beach where he had lived. At this time, his younger brother arrived, but he was in too much of a hurry, so he tripped right in front of the class president. After helping the boy up and joking with him, unexpectedly, he recognized her voice. Finally, mustering all his courage, he asked her if she was the radio announcer, and he was right. When the class president asked his age, she found out that he was still 4 years away from turning 20. She promised to wait for him to grow up and make him happy. After arriving at the beach, everyone played happily. This was the first time Hee-do went on an extracurricular trip, so she was very happy. Moreover, because Yijin was there, she loved this moment even more. At dinner time, Yijin let the kids prepare the food themselves while he went to buy meat for grilling. One kid used a large bowl to scoop rice, another one started a fire like they were building a bonfire. Even more surprisingly, another one washed the vegetables with laundry detergent. Yijin was shocked, his legs went weak, and he collapsed to the ground. In the end, he had to do everything for this meal. Unexpectedly, Yijin's uncle brought watermelon to treat them, so Yijin went into the house to get the expensive bottle of wine that the class president brought to give to his uncle, because he knew the kids were planning to take it to drink. After that, Yijin asked everyone to call home to let their families know that they were safe. Everyone called home, only Hee-do sent a message, but her mother scolded her for disappointing her. This made the atmosphere of the outing gloomy. Seeing this, Hee-do told everyone a secret that she didn't have a father since she was in first grade. What she hated most was her mother, because her mother never mentioned her father. Hee-do really wanted to say that she missed her father, but her mother never seemed to mention him. She was quite envious of Yu-rim because her friend had a loving father. Suddenly, Hee-do noticed Jae-woong crying, and to avoid attracting attention, he played a trick to make everyone forget that he was crying. Later, the group went to the beach together to watch the sunset. They felt fond of this moment. Yijin also felt more relaxed in the positivity of youth. At this time, Min-ki realized that her mother had completely forgotten about that year's field trip, and she was somewhat disappointed because her mother used to cherish them. Min-ki curiously asked why her mother fixed the old chair, and she found out that it was a souvenir left by her father, made by her mother's father himself. But since her father passed away, she and her mother gradually stopped sitting there. Hee-do and Yijin were sitting and stacking seashells at this time, but because they were so busy talking, Hee-do lost and had to be punished. He didn't go easy on her because he cared, which made Hee-do angry, and she retaliated by punching him in the eye. Sure enough, the next day Yijin's eye was bruised. Before leaving, Yijin placed his phone on a rock along with 4 coins. Jun saw this and secretly took them. Before returning to the city, they didn't forget to take a commemorative photo together. The next day, Hee-do felt happy when she saw those pictures. She wrote everyone's name on them. For Yijin, the female lead intentionally wrote her own name after it. When everyone gathered at the training ground, they received the unexpected news that there would be a practice session with the seniors tomorrow afternoon. Both Hee-do and Yu-ji were excited at this time. Yu-rim was worried because the unexpected practice session coincided with Jae-woong's performance, while she had agreed to watch him perform, but she couldn't change her schedule. Jae-woong was extremely disappointed when Yu-rim cancelled, because he was planning to use this opportunity to confess his feelings to her. That night, Hee-do got home and suddenly discovered that the chair was rotten and about to break. She told her mother and wanted them to go fix it together. Her mother agreed and promised to go with her to fix it the next day. The next day, as Hee-do and Yu-rim sat waiting for the bus, Hee-do finally asked Yu-rim why she disliked her when they first met. Yu-rim told her that when she was younger, she was afraid that Hee-do would be obsessed with her, so she was always afraid that Hee-do would surpass her. At this time, Yu-rim still felt apprehensive when competing with Hee-do. But ironically, Hee-do later became a fan of Yu-rim. The two of them could only look at each other and laugh because of this twist of fate. That night, Yijin invited Hee-do to an upscale restaurant. When Hee-do asked why, he told her the good news that he had become a full-time employee and would be in charge of covering the female lead's fencing. At this point, Hee-do finally relaxed her body to enjoy the food. After finishing, Hee-do dragged him to a convenience store on the street to draw a lottery ticket. They both looked very happy and carefree. In the end, they won a pink box of colored pencils. The next day at work, when his boss needed a pen, Yijin accidentally brought the pink box out. Everyone thought he loved pink and hated hypocrisy. That evening, when he got off work, he suddenly met Hee-do's mother. Everyone in the newsroom was drinking, so she was a little drunk. While chatting with Yijin, he found out that Hee-do's mother had a very passionate love for her profession. This helped him understand her a little better. Suddenly, someone came in to report urgent news, so everyone who was playing rushed back to the station to deliver the news. Even though she had been drinking, Hee-doo's mother still maintained her professionalism and composure. At this point, it was raining and Hee-doo was also waiting for her mother to come home. But because it was taking too long, she went by herself. As she went down the stairs, she slipped and broke a chair. Suddenly, her mother came home, holding her phone and talking very happily. Then, she blamed her mother for being inconsiderate, not keeping her promise, and mentioned how she hadn't come to her father's funeral because of urgent news. But Hee-doo didn't know what her mother had really endured. The two of them had a huge fight. Later, her mother threw the chair away. Hee-doo was looking for the chair in the trash to fix it, but it wasn't there. Coincidentally, Yi-jin was on his way home and saw this. He asked Hee-doo, and she could only cry from frustration. The next day, Hee-doo decided to use all her savings to learn how to make chairs. In the afternoon, Yi-jin came and lied to the coach, saying that he needed 2 champion fencers to film a documentary to take to Iron's performance. Because the night before, the kid had called and confided in him. When they got to the performance, the guitarist suddenly left because his girlfriend broke up with him. Coincidentally, Yi-jin walked in and was pulled in to be his replacement. This was like bringing him back to his youth. The performance was a success. Afterwards, Hee-doo took him to the school's recording studio, wanting him to listen to the old recordings again. The class president saw this and turned on the school radio for everyone to hear. Then, they went to the rooftop to watch the fireworks. Yu-rim and Jae-woong also arrived and announced that they were officially dating, to Hee-doo's surprise. The next day, Hee-doo went to the workshop to learn, and she discovered her father's chair there. She found out that her mother was the one who brought it. Her mother gave very detailed instructions about making sure it was placed next to it. When Hee-doo got home, she saw her mother packing fruit into a bag. When she asked, she found out that today was the anniversary of her father's passing. She quickly changed clothes and went with her mother to visit the grave. Today, Hee-doo witnessed her normally strong mother crying silently like this for the first time. Finally, she confided in her, saying that she missed Hee-doo's father. So the mother and daughter embraced and cried at the grave of the father. For the first time, Hee-doo saw her mother cry and say that she missed her father. At this time, she finally understood what her mother had endured to get through the days without her father. After returning home, the mother and daughter became closer. But when she found out that Hee-doo wasn't going to take the college entrance exam, she scolded her. The next day, when she went to the training room, Iag suddenly asked to quit fencing, but she was scolded by the coach. The next day, Yi intentionally didn't show up for practice. When they asked why, Hee-doo and Yu-rim spoke up for their junior, and they even stopped training. If the coach didn't let Erg leave the club, it was because Hee-doo knew she didn't have passion for this sport anymore. The next day, Jae-woong wore a floral shirt to school. This shirt was on the news because it was the shirt of an escaped criminal. He was admired by his classmates because he was the first in school to guess who was wearing this shirt. But unexpectedly, this caught the eye of a violent teacher at the school. He didn't say much before he beat Jae-woong until he was bleeding from the mouth. The class president saw this and told the teacher all her anger, and he challenged her to call the police. Unexpectedly, she took out her phone and called the police. But after the police arrived at the school, they couldn't solve anything and even supported the teacher's teaching methods. At this time, she was speechless, unable to win against these people. Late at night, Yi-jin went to the police station to get information. He accidentally heard about the class president's case and immediately ran to find her. Just as his senior was about to interview the class president, luckily he arrived in time. Otherwise, she would have been subjected to online criticism because the reporter was only exploiting her and criticizing her actions. The next morning, because of Yu-rim's actions, she went to the discussion room and agreed to let Yi-jae leave the club if she won the quarterfinal. So Yu-rim and Hee-doo worked hard to support and teach their junior. The next morning, Yi-jin went to work as usual. At this time, he suddenly heard everyone talking about the baseball game tomorrow, but no one wanted to take it. Yi-jin volunteered to go to challenge himself after the incident with the live broadcast. That night, it rained heavily, so Yi-jin's handwritten notes were blurry and illegible. Luckily, he had memorized them beforehand. After the news ended successfully, everyone praised the male lead's maturity. This made him quite happy. Afterwards, he went to his meeting place to meet Hee-doo. Suddenly, a Frenchman came to ask for his help, but they couldn't communicate. Luckily, Hee-do arrived and helped the man find his luggage. Yejin was very surprised by Hee-do's ability to speak French, because she still wrote Korean incorrectly. Then he found out that the female lead had lived in Paris for a while to learn fencing. After eating and taking Hee-do back to the hotel, because she wanted to be by his side, she went outside to buy yogurt for Yu-rim. Then, the two of them went for a walk together. After seeing Hee-do back to the hotel, suddenly Hee-do's ex-boyfriend came to see her. He just wanted to confirm whether Hee-do really mattered to Yejin or not. Yejin's words from the bottom of his heart were overheard by Hee-do. In the end, during Eeg's match, with the efforts of the three of them, the girl won an incredible victory. But Yegi still decided to give up fencing because she no longer had passion for it. The coach was quite sad about Yegi's decision, but he no longer objected. The next day, the teacher proactively called her into his office to check on her because he had heard her radio condemnation and wanted her to write a self-criticism and apologize to him in front of everyone. Otherwise, he would make the class president's school record worse. Unexpectedly, the class president proactively dropped out of school and left proudly. That night, she and her mother embraced and cried, but she didn't regret her actions. The teacher couldn't keep saving students from violence forever. In the end, her mother respected her decision. The next day, she informed her remaining friends about it. No matter how much they advised her, the class president wouldn't change her mind. The next morning, her mother put on makeup like a lady and asked for a withdrawal form to sign and leave this dirty school. She didn't forget to give that teacher a piece of her mind. Then, she left the school amidst the regret of her friends. Finally, the day of the college entrance exam arrived. The class president had changed her appearance and was satisfied with her decision. At this time, only Hee-do and Jae-woong were left to take the exam. On New Year's Eve, the four of them went to Yejin's house to welcome Doomsday because the news was also speculating about it. Before 12 o'clock, everyone went home, only Hee-do and Yejin stayed. There were only a few seconds left before the year 2000 arrived. Hee-do proactively kissed Yejin because she wanted to do something she wouldn't regret if Doomsday happened. After the kiss, that night, the two of them avoided each other. Hee-do was very sad because Yejin didn't want the relationship to go further. This made the female lead very sad. The next day, Hee-do went out with her group of friends in a half-conscious state. Unexpectedly, Jae-woong wanted to take them out in his car. But when he got on the main road, he drove at 5 km/h. In addition, the sweat on his body was dripping, making Hee-do and the class president in the back feel like something bad was going to happen, so they fastened their seatbelts. Later, someone mentioned the word kiss, and suddenly Hee-do admitted that she had tried that feeling. Everyone greeted the person as Yejin, making Hee-do jump. At this time, halfway there, Jae-woong wanted to turn back because he was scared. The other three started to worry, each of them holding on tightly and praying to get home safely. But misfortune struck. The parking space was already taken. If he didn't park the car in the right spot, his mother would kill him. So all four of them waited impatiently until the car left. But worse was to come. Jae-woong didn't know how to park. He tried to park 10 times, 8 turns, and still couldn't do it. Finally, while waiting for someone to help, his junior happened to pass by. Hee-do saw this and suggested that everyone carry the car back to its original place. In the end, they succeeded. It made the kids celebrate like they were at a festival. The next day, Yejin accidentally met the coach talking to Hee-do's mother. Afterwards, she invited him to hang out a little. At this time, she also told him why she and Hee-do's mother were so distant now. The two of them were originally strangers and became close because of their different professions. But it was also because of these opposing professions that they hadn't seen each other in a decade. At this time, Yejin also looked down and reflected on the relationship between him and Hee-do. In the end, Hee-do proactively waited for Yejin to come home. After that, they went out for a late-night meal together. While they were eating, Hee-do suddenly noticed a stain on Yejin's shirt and wanted to help him get it off. When she got close, Yejin quickly moved away because he was afraid she would kiss him. Hee-do knew he was thinking wrong, so she was very angry and went back. Yejin got drunk because of that incident. Sure enough, he called and told his heart to the other person. Unexpectedly, that person was Jae-woong, not Hee-do. The kid at this time also knew whose kiss Hee-do was talking about. The next morning, Yejin found out about this and was very regretful. He promised that the next time he drank, he would be a dog. While going to work, he suddenly met Iron and was teased by the kid, but he couldn't do anything. The next day, Hee-do was scolded by the coach for not focusing during practice. At this time, Hee-do's mood was quite unstable, so she couldn't focus. After talking with Yu-rim, Hee-do found out that they had the same scar. It turned out to be a scar from when the two of them fought in the bathroom. You could consider it a symbol of their friendship. Yu-jin met his senior to talk about his own situation, and his senior advised him that reporters absolutely shouldn't have close relationships with their sources. At this time, Yu-jin also gave up and wanted to keep his distance from Hee-do. But when he got home, he saw Hee-do waiting for him. She confessed her feelings to him again and was rejected. The next day was the final match for Hee-do and Yu-rim, because they would no longer be teammates after this. But during warm-ups, Hee-do lost. When Hee-do went outside, she was mocked by her opponent. But because of her opponent's arrogance, Hee-do learned about her own weakness. During the break, Hee-do and a senior talked and joked in front of Yu-jin, but she didn't know that he was incredibly jealous on the other side. After the official match began, the results were as expected. Hee-do and Yu-rim's team won completely. At this time, Hee-do truly felt the unity of her teammates. She really loved this feeling. But Yu-jin was not as lucky. He was scolded by the director for using too mushy language in the news report. That night, he went home dejectedly. After not seeing Hee-do waiting for him, he felt very disappointed. Suddenly, Hee-do's voice came from behind. She wanted to welcome the first snow of the season with him. But at this point, Yu-jin suggested that they should keep their distance, and he went into the house decisively. At this time, she cried and expressed her feelings. Suddenly, the door opened, and he rushed out and kissed her. This was like confirming that he had accepted this forbidden love. In the end, Yu-jin confirmed his relationship with Hee-do, but for some reason, by 2009, they were no longer together, and they could only greet each other through live broadcasts. At this time, each of them had their own achievements. Moreover, in 2001, Hee-do and Yu-rim became rivals. Hee-do represented South Korea, while Yu-rim had changed her name to Julia Ko and represented Russia. Let's find out what happened. At this time, Hee-do and Diern suddenly held hands in front of everyone's surprised eyes. Yu-rim also warned him not to make Hee-do cry. The class president saw this scene and only wanted to get drunk so she wouldn't see the dog food of these two couples. Then, they went to Yu-jin's guest house to have a party. At this time, everyone was drunk, starting to make a mess of the whole room. Seeing this, Yu-rim and Jae-woong withdrew first. Suddenly, Yu-rim received news that her father had an accident. She rushed to the hospital in panic, but when she found out that her father wasn't seriously injured, she was relieved. But the person her father hit was not as lucky. The two of them argued about this, and Yu-rim stood outside and heard everything. The next day, Yu-rim went to see the coach. At this time, she didn't know what had happened and excitedly boasted that she had become a coach for the athletes. But immediately after that, Yu-rim said that she would sign a contract with a foreign country and accept a change of nationality because she desperately needed money. That night, Brazil came to Hee-do's house and told her his decision. He kept his promise to the female lead, not dealing with his emotions by jumping into the pool, but seeking her out. Hee-do also didn't agree with Yu-rim's way of doing things because she would be stoned by online communities, but Yu-rim had already made her decision. Now all that was left was to wait for her flight. After her parents found out, they tried to stop Yu-rim from loving Jae-woong, because if she did, the whole country of South Korea would boycott her and see her as a traitor. But Yu-rim didn't care. What she cared about was a happy family, being supported by her parents. At this point, her parents could only choke back tears because Yu-rim had sacrificed herself too much for her family. However, only Jae-woong didn't stop her decision, and even praised her for being cool. This made Yu-rim feel happy. Afterwards, Yu-jin also came to find her, but when he found out that she had prepared everything, he just came and said that he would be the one to report on Yu-rim directly. He knew this would hurt everyone, but he couldn't do anything else. The next day, the class president's mother also prepared a farewell party for the four of them. They recounted their happy memories from the past. Suddenly, on the news, they saw Yu-jin talking about Yu-rim's decision to change her nationality. This made everyone's mood drop. Hee-do saw this and quickly went to find Yu-jin to ask what was going on, but he couldn't do anything else. Maybe he would hurt Hee-do like this later. At this time, Yu-rim and Jae-woong were on their way home. Suddenly Yu-rim said that she didn't want a binding relationship anymore because that would be selfish. Moreover, Yu-rim didn't know if she could return to her country. Jae-woong was truly disappointed because Yu-rim had given up so soon. The two of them broke up sadly. The next day, Yu-rim went to the training room to pack her things, when suddenly reporters came from somewhere. She could only lock all the doors and sit in a corner, then call Hee-do. Finally, Hee-do arrived. After a while, Hee-do created a Yu-rim dummy to trick the reporters. In the end, they succeeded. Then, they hid in a photo booth on the side of the road to avoid the reporters. They didn't forget to take commemorative photos. Next, they ate black bean noodles together at a restaurant that Yu-rim had visited before. But the owner gave her an attitude. He didn't sell her noodles because he thought she was a traitor. But at this time, Yu-rim was different. Before, she didn't dare to express her thoughts, but now she dared to assert that she wasn't a traitor. She was only selling her talent to earn money to support her family. He didn't know what to say, so he had to bring a fresh bowl of noodles for Yu-rim, but he tore off her signature from the restaurant. Finally, the day Yu-rim left came. When Jae-woong found out that Yu-rim was leaving, he didn't care about his fear of driving and rushed to see her off. In the end, he made it in time. Then, Jae-woong didn't allow Yu-rim to date anyone else because he felt the same way. The two of them kissed as a commitment to each other. At this time, Yi-jin was on his way home, passing by the place where the five of them used to have so much fun. He burst into tears when he saw someone write on the wall, "Yu-rim is a traitor," because he felt self-blame. Unexpectedly, Hee-do witnessed this scene. She brought her tools to erase the dirty words. When she saw Yi-jin sitting there crying helplessly, she knew that whenever he was sad, he would secretly cry alone, and she hugged him and comforted him as his girlfriend. Hee-do suggested to him that when he faced difficulties, he should share them with her. Then, the two of them erased the words on the wall together. The next morning, Yi-jin went to see Hee-do's mother and asked to be transferred to the social section because he was afraid that one day he would hurt Hee-do like he had before. His senior also agreed because she knew that she had already done enough to hurt Hee-do. After transferring to the social section, his work became much busier. At this time, Hee-do suddenly received an email from Yu-rim. She was very happy. Yu-rim in Russia had quickly integrated with everyone, while Hee-do on this side was the same as before, still guided by her coach. Since Yi-jin moved to the social section, he had less time to spend with Hee-do, but the group's drinking habit remained unchanged. Jae-woong had also flown to Russia to visit his girlfriend. You could say this was one of the things that made Yu-rim happiest. And finally, New Year's Eve arrived. Late at night, Hee-do went to Yi-jin's workplace because he was delivering the news and couldn't come to her. As soon as he finished the news, he rushed her to a place where they could see the whole city. The scenery was amazing. There, they promised that they would watch the fireworks together next New Year's Eve. The class president at this time had also passed the entrance exam to her desired university and was elected as the representative of her freshman class. Suddenly, one day, Yu-rim no longer read or replied to Hee-do's emails. That night, as Hee-do was on her way back from practice, she encountered a building collapse and saw Yi-jin reporting on the news. When the female lead was about to cry, she saw him lost in thought because lately all of his news reports had involved people dying, and he had witnessed too much loss. So Hee-do decided to secretly watch him. After arriving at the bar with his senior, Hee-do suddenly sat next to him and spoke up. He ignored everyone and quickly hugged her, making his senior embarrassed and blushing. She left before him. Finally, they both got drunk. When Yi-jin saw Hee-do sleeping soundly, he felt happy because they were not as unfortunate as the people he had witnessed earlier. The two of them talked to each other and found out that they were always secretly supporting each other's work. At this time, in the training room, Hee-do was also being interviewed by a reporter. When the question involved Yu-rim, Hee-do quickly took the clock hanging on the wall and placed it in front of her chest to avoid the reporter twisting her words. Finally, the day of the showdown between Hee-do and Yu-rim arrived. Yu-rim excitedly came to greet Hee-do, when suddenly the coach appeared. The two of them embraced, but when the coach came in and told Hee-do that Yu-rim was outside, Hee-do refused to see her. This made Yu-rim quite sad. In the end, the final match arrived. Both of them carried heavy burdens on their shoulders. At first, Rim scored first, but very quickly the score evened out. The match was truly a close call. In the end, Hee-do won. When they took off their helmets, they both cried because they had tried to contain their emotions to finish the match, making the audience shed tears as well. To celebrate Hee-do's victory, her mother and Yi-jin invited her out to eat. But by the time, Yi-jin had an urgent matter so he couldn't come. On the way home, her mother asked Hee-do if she could accept the nature of Yi-jin's job, because in the future, the frequency of Yi-jin's apologies would be higher. The next day was the 600th day anniversary of their relationship. They had planned to travel together. Yi-jin had prepared everything. At this point, Hee-do was at the train station to wait for him. Suddenly, there was news of a bombing in New York on the bulletin board. Hee-do felt uneasy, and Yi-jin reported that he had an urgent matter and cancelled the trip because he had to fly to New York urgently. Hee-do didn't go back, but went to the hotel they had booked. Everything was ready, but Yi-jin was missing. At this time, she also thought about her mother's words. They would always stay in touch, but since Yi-jin went to New York, he had broken his promises to her more and more. New Year's Eve also arrived, but Yi-jin didn't come back as promised. When fans asked her if she had a boyfriend, Hee-do's answer was that she didn't know. The next day, her mother told her that Yi-jin had applied to be a full-time reporter in New York. That meant he wouldn't be able to return home for a long time. The next day, his application was approved. At this time, she didn't know whether to be happy or sad. That night, he called to tell Hee-do the news and said he would be returning to South Korea at the end of the month to settle some things. But during that time, Hee-do would be in Europe competing. The next morning, while Jae-woong was taking photos, suddenly Rim appeared. He thought he was dreaming. Then, he confirmed it with a kiss. That night, she brought her boyfriend to meet her parents. The introduction was quite successful, but very tense. After getting off the plane and on the way home, suddenly the television station wanted to get footage. He had left his computer in the suitcase in the trunk, so he asked the driver to pull over so he could get it. After opening the suitcase, he discovered fencing gear and realized it belonged to Hee-do. He went to the airport hoping to meet her and exchange suitcases. But unexpectedly, Hee-do had left his suitcase at the counter. He also realized that her intention was to avoid him. That night, Yi-jin brought the suitcase to Hee-do's doorstep. At this point, Hee-do quickly came outside and found him. She wanted to say goodbye to Yi-jin, and this was the place where they met, and it was also the place where she said goodbye. The next day, to celebrate Rim's return to the country, everyone gathered together, but Yi-jin didn't come. Seeing something was amiss, Hee-do publicly announced that they had broken up. This shocked everyone. But even more heartbreaking was when, while handing Hee-do her phone, Rim accidentally dropped it into the hot pot. Hee-do had to buy a new one. When the owner asked about the couple plan, Hee-do said she would cancel it. But the owner said she needed Yi-jin's consent to cancel, so she had to call Yi-jin to come over. At this point, the owner brought out the contract. After they both signed the agreement, the owner seemed to be about to collapse. On the way back, the two of them clashed. Yi-jin wanted to hold on to Hee-do, but she lost her temper because of Yi-jin's inconsiderateness over the past 6 months. In the end, due to excessive stress, she fainted while training. When her mother found out that the two of them had broken up, she wanted to find Yi-jin to settle the score, but Hee-do stopped her. The next morning, she returned to the dormitory, but on the bus, she accidentally dropped her diary. When she went back to look for it, it was gone. In Yi-jin's dream, there was only Hee-do. When he woke up with a start, he realized that tears were already streaming down his face. The next morning, he suddenly saw a package at his doorstep, sent by a stranger. Yi-jin opened it and read it, and he understood what Hee-do had been going through all this time. At this point, he finally understood Hee-do's words that day. The next day, while she was practicing, Hee-do received news that Yi-jin was about to leave. Without thinking twice, she immediately ran to his house. Yi-jin, on the other hand, ran to her house to say goodbye. In the end, they couldn't meet each other. When she went back, Hee-do accidentally saw Yi-jin's suitcase left at the bus stop. She stood there waiting until Yi-jin came back. He tried to control his emotions before he dared to walk towards Hee-do. Finally, they could only embrace each other and say goodbye in tears. At this time, Hee-do also went to see the coach and expressed her desire to retire. She didn't stop Hee-do, but encouraged her to make her own decision. At this time, while she was working, the class president received news that her father had passed away. She wasn't too heartbroken because her father had been bedridden for 2 years. After going outside to watch the butterflies, the class president sighed, because there were only flowers but no people. Suddenly, her close friends came. Unexpectedly, they had gathered for a funeral after such a long time. That night, Yijin also came, but the kids had already left, so they couldn't meet each other. When the class president saw her senior off, a young driver of Yijin's proactively greeted her. Unexpectedly, he was Yijin's brother. The boy was handsome, so the class president wasn't interested in anything else, only asking for his contact information. The next day, in Yu Rim's training class, a young student suddenly wanted to fight her so he could confidently step onto the stage. After entering the match, the young man in front of her performed very poorly. Yu Rim yelled at him. But when he took off his helmet, unexpectedly, it was Jae-woon. He came here to propose to his girlfriend of 10 years. She was surprised but very happy because of her boyfriend's actions. During the retirement ceremony, Hee-do mentioned Yu Rim. At this time, Yu Rim had also come and heard Hee-do's words. She felt very warm and proud. Suddenly, Yu Rim stepped out of the crowd and congratulated Hee-do on her retirement. The two of them embraced in front of the reporters. Returning to reality, suddenly the owner of the old bookstore came to Hee-do's house, delivering a document that Yijin had sent there 10 years ago. He had just remembered it and came to Hee-do's house. After Min Kai received it and realized it was the diary she had been looking for so long, then Min Ki told her mother that she wanted to continue studying ballet so she could immerse herself in it like her mother used to, and handed the diary back to her mother. Coincidentally, she saw the letters that Yijin had written to her 10 years ago. Hee-do unconsciously went back to the place where she had heard him before. She wanted to go back in time to say the words she really wanted to say, but the outcome was the same. She could only say goodbye in regret.